All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another CoinDesk webinar, this time with RSK, DeFi on Bitcoin Revolution. I'm super excited for this topic today. For those of you who don't know me, I am Nathaniel Whittemore, the host of the Breakdown podcast. And today we are going to be talking about what is not only an emergent and hugely exciting part of the Bitcoin ecosystem, but something which could drive this asset into becoming the centerpiece of not just a new narrative, but a real alternative to the existing monetary and financial system. I'm joined by Diego, Idan, and Max, our excellent panelists. I'm going to have each of you guys introduce yourself briefly, and then we're going to jump right into this conversation. So, Diego, maybe just quickly who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm Diego Gutierrez Aldivar. People know me as Dieguito. I'm the CEO of IOV Labs. That is the organization that has been, driving the creation of the RSK technology now in the hands of the community. But also, I've been a Bitcoin advocate for 8 years, creating the Bitcoin communities in Latin America. So that's me pushing the Bitcoin technology and ecosystem forward to put it to the service of society. That's my main objective.
Awesome. Idan, how about you? Oh, you're muted.
Hey, so I'm Idan or Iago. I, like the other people actually on this panel, coincidentally grew up in an environment in a country where there were substantial capital controls and substantial financial surveillance, which is basically the whole world right now. So when I came across Bitcoin for the first time, because I was studying network science in 2011, it just clicked for me immediately. And I've been trying to be involved ever since in doing what I can to contribute to getting financial sovereignty into the hands of as many people as possible. And right now I'm contributing to a project called Sovereign, which is a decentralized Bitcoin DeFi platform.
Awesome. And we're going to get into each of these projects a little bit more in just a minute. But Max, let's throw it over to you.
I am Max Capusa. I am co-founder of the Money on Chain protocol. I've been in the space like for 9-10 years. I grew up in Argentina, a country with capital controls and hyperinflation. So I think that has a lot to do with my involvement in Bitcoin.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess another topic that we're going to talk a lot more about is the context for users in this new DeFi on Bitcoin ecosystem. But I guess maybe let's start off with a frame setting question, which is DeFi, decentralized finance, is a term that's now become part of the crypto lexicon. But I think you all have a very particular set of things that this notion really means about open financial systems, about certain values. So I guess let's talk about what decentralized finance, how you look at decentralized finance, what decentralized finance really means, and what Bitcoin brings to the decentralized finance conversation on a core philosophical or objective level. Diego, let's start with you again, just for the sake of for jumping in somewhere.
Perfect. I think in a way DeFi is more of an aspirational term than a reality, because with the exception of certain protocols like Bitcoin itself that is truly decentralized, most DeFi protocols so far has some point of decentralization. So in my point of view, what we are building with the DeFi, or as I like to call it, open finance protocols, is a truly open and neutral financial system that is not discriminating any human being, regardless of their nationality or economic situation, that will serve any human being regardless of its current condition. So for me, decentralization is a tool to protect that openness, that neutrality, and the sovereignty of individuals. So that's my point of view. Is like taking all the financial services that exist today in centralized systems, controlled by institutions and governments, and build them in an open environment where human beings can interact in a peer-to-peer fashion without censorship. So that's what I think about DeFi.
Max or Idan, anything to add?
Well, I completely agree with Diego. When I think about DeFi, I think in a new finance ecosystem, completely transparent, where nobody can change the rules. I think that is the main goal of DeFi.
The only thing I would add is, Bitcoin created this permissionless, incorruptible, borderless monetary system, right? And the monetary system as the currency is the base for financial and economic activity. But we're stuck in this absurd situation where if you want to actually use your Bitcoin, you need to put it you need to give up that control and use a centralized service, an exchange, a lending platform. And so I think what I see the effort of DeFi as being is expanding the promise of Bitcoin and the potential of Bitcoin into the financial sphere, which I think is like layer 2. It's like the next 10 years of this journey. And then I think the final boss is that on the basis of that monetary financial layer, we can build an economic layer, which is just as global, permissionless, and incorruptible as Bitcoin itself. And so everyone can live their entire economic lives with the self-sovereign tools.
It's great. So we're going to come back to this idea of an end boss.
Yes.
For
No,
sure.
and I think one point that Eden brought that is very important is like, how we protect this sovereignty, how we make sure. I think the point on Eden is very important. Is like, what's the promise of Bitcoin, and why extending Bitcoin to be a full financial system is so important.
So I guess with that kind of context, I want our listeners and our viewers to have a sense of where your particular projects fit in. Because we're going to talk about a lot of things that don't necessarily relate to those exact projects, but I think it'd be helpful. So maybe, Dan, we can start with you and talk about Sovereign and what it's trying to achieve, how it fits kind of in that larger framework that you just set out.
Yeah, so I think what has already been accomplished in building out DeFi platforms, right? Decentralized financial platforms is incredible. We've got decentralized dollars, which compete with dollars printed by the Fed in the form of MakerDAO. We've got Uniswap, which is the ability, becoming one of the most popular exchanges in the world, and other tools like that. The big problem is that for the most part, Bitcoin, the most liquid, important reserve asset of the entire space, right? 90% of the liquidity is in Bitcoin, has been disconnected, has been trapped or locked out of this DeFi system. And what you obviously want is you want the monetary base of the system to be connected to the financial base of the system. And so what Sovereign is working to do is to connect these two worlds by, on the one hand, acting as a side chain to Bitcoin. So it's backed by Bitcoin proof of work, and providing the basic financial functions of lending, trading, conditional payments, and at the same time almost acting as the Bitcoin the Bitcoin shard for Ethereum, allowing the flow of value and the flow of technologies between these two things.
Got it. Diego, let's go over to you and talk a little bit about RSK.
Well, we started RSK with one vision that was that conceptually Bitcoin was the foundation of a new internet for the transfer of value, the internet, what we call the internet of value, and that internet of value was going to be built in layers. Okay, so in that sense, for us, delegation of responsibilities was key. It's like Bitcoin is designed to maximize security, to be the digital gold, a censorship-resistant store of value, but it sacrifices some functionality, and also sacrifices on scalability. There's always a trade-off. It's like the safest the protocol, the less scalable, the less flexible, because those things are in opposition by definition. It's like the bigger the surface of attack, the more complex a system is, the less secure is. So Bitcoin was designed to maximize security and sacrifice the other aspects. So what we did is start designing protocols on top of Bitcoin that would extend Bitcoin capabilities, sacrificing some certain level of security. And RSK is the first protocol we deployed that started with 5% of the hashing power, protecting it in 2018, at the beginning of 2018. And during 2020, it achieves a level of support of, at moments, 80%, more than 80% of the hashing power of Bitcoin. And now it's stable around 60% of the hashing power of Bitcoin. So what we did is add that second layer to Bitcoin for smart contracts, where you can run the same smart contracts that you can run on Ethereum, where you can have the same functionality, but secured by the Bitcoin network and with Bitcoin as the native currency. So that was the first step. And then on top of that, we created a third layer of protocols, peer-to-peer protocols that use the smart contract layer or the agreement layer for dispute resolution, that enables you to do peer-to-peer transactions. So then you have the equivalent of Lightning, Lumino protocols. So you have payment channels. Also, you have payment hubs. You have different protocols that enable you to extend this Internet of Value to operate fully decentralized. So we are building data storage protocols that are decentralized, where you can store your information, aliases, so you can use nicknames to transfer and interact in the transfer of value. So that's basically what RSK has been building, a full stack on top of Bitcoin to have a truly peer-to-peer financial infrastructure. And then on that ecosystem, different projects are launching their decentralized finance solutions and creating value on top of that.
Awesome. And Max, talk to us a little bit about money on chain.
Okay, well, we designed money on chain to address a couple of real needs in the real world. The first need that we want to address was people in third world countries like Argentina and Venezuela that are not allowed to buy US dollar, and they have very, very, very weak currencies. So for those people, we created the dollar on chain. The dollar on chain is a one-to-one peg to a US dollar stablecoin. But the interesting thing is that that peg is warranted by the smart contract. The collateral that the system uses is only Bitcoin. So you are always be able to transform your dollar on chain to Bitcoin, interacting directly with on the protocol. And the other part of the dream was to give the Bitcoin holders an opportunity to earn satoshis or earn a passive income in their Bitcoins, helping these people in the third world countries. So for them, we created the BitPro. The BitPro is a liquidity token. The BitPro token is the token that allows the dollar on chain to exist. And the BitPro token earns all the money that people holding the stablecoin left on the table. And then we have a third token that is called the BTCX, that is specifically a token for people willing to go long using leverage in the price of Bitcoin. So with these three tokens, we address the most basic needs in the crypto, in the Bitcoin space. That is, people willing to go away from the Bitcoin volatility for a while, people willing to earn a passive income in their Bitcoins, and people willing to trade in the price of Bitcoin.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're going to come back. I think there are a couple of themes that you mentioned that we're going to come back to, particularly in terms of the types of users that your projects in this sort of Bitcoin DeFi space are really focused on. But I think what I want to do next is actually talk through the set of trends that are making this such an interesting moment for DeFi on Bitcoin. And Idan, when we talked before we were preparing for this conversation, you had a nice little layout of a set of trends that you see that are shaping things. So let's kick it over to you and talk through that set of trends that are so important and contextual for what we're discussing.
Right. So I think there's, four big trends, mega trends impacting crypto over the course of 2021. And sort of the theme is a tension between two different forces, which is causing a polarization. The same sort of polarization we've seen in every other facet of our lives is now being brought to the crypto space. And on the one hand, you have increasing institutional involvement, and as a result, also increasing regulatory involvement. And on the other hand, you're starting to see increasing use of even more decentralized, even more loosely affiliated or unregulatable products in the form of DeFi. So I think the big first trend which is driving this is we currently as a species are in the middle of an inflationary bull run. And this inflationary bull run is impacting all asset classes, but it impacts Bitcoin in a very special way. Bitcoin is the only asset class which benefits both as an inflationary hedge and as a risk asset. And so anything that happens during this inflationary bull run impacts Bitcoin far more than any other asset class. And so, we certainly, the last month has been ample proof of that. This is driving a great deal of new users, a great deal of new activity in the space, which is impacting the second trend, which is that the second most systemic blockchain in the space is struggling under the stress of this new degree of scale that it needs to attain. So Ethereum, which has always had the culture of being a hyper-inclusive community, a hyper-inclusive blockchain, has de facto become probably the most hyper-exclusive financial system, in that transaction fees are easily $20, $30 for simple transactions and can be $300 for complex transactions, which means that the vast majority of people are being locked out, certainly of the ability to profitably use Ethereum. And as a result, Ethereum itself is starting to disassemble itself into layer 2 systems in the form of rollups and bridges. And so everything that we thought we knew about Ethereum and its network effects is starting to change. The layer 1 network effect is being downplayed, and it is being replaced by this assortment of layer 2s. And so what is becoming the new network effect is not the chain, but the assets. And as a result, we're starting to see Bitcoin and stablecoins becoming the network effect in the crypto space, because they are the reserve assets. Bitcoin, the reserve asset, sort of like the trustless reserve asset, and stablecoins being the reserve asset, acting as the gateway or the payment bridge to the fiat world. And so we've seen billions and billions of dollars of value in both Bitcoin and stablecoins migrate to Ethereum. And as rollups become more important, we will see the relative importance of Ethereum, sort of as the base asset in the Ethereum network, continue to decline relative to the assets like Bitcoin and stablecoins. And then finally, across all of this, I heard you talking about it, I think, this morning, is the regulatory trend. So as we've seen, on the one hand, more institutions pile in, and on the other hand, DeFi even further accentuate the inability to regulate the space, and this growth of the entire asset class in this global inflationary environment. Suddenly, for the first time, crypto is no longer a toy. It's a real reserve asset. It's a real threat to the status quo. And even the most unimaginable bureaucrat can now imagine a world in which Bitcoin and in which stablecoins are starting to eat away at the monopoly that governments, and in particular the US government, have traditionally held in the monetary and financial space. And so we're starting to see more regulatory pressure on the space. And I think that this is actually going to accentuate the polarization. On the one hand, we'll start to see institutions demand more and more regulated exchanges. There'll probably be M&A in that space. But on the other hand, a large number of users, and particularly those who most need crypto for self-sovereignty, like people from Argentina, like people from China, are going to migrate more and more into the DeFi space.
Diego, Max, anything to add on some of these sort of big trends? I mean, especially you guys have been in this space for a long time. You've been thinking about this set of issues for a long time. It seems like what you've been building and thinking about is intersecting with the right moment now. I mean, is that fair? And if so, what else is driving that?
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed. I mean, I was preparing for this moment all my life, if you want to. I'm exaggerating, but I mean, everything, the reasons why we started RSK were to be prepared for this moment. We realized Bitcoin was going to become what is becoming today. And we wanted to create on top of that a truly decentralized, censorship-resistant financial system, full-feature financial system, and that's happening through the different DeFi protocols. And of course, this is a process. No, decentralization is not a static thing, and people tend to see things like in static ways, like a picture, and this is a movie. It's evolving all the time, and I mean, even Bitcoin has been decentralized itself, over the years, and the level of decentralization achieved today, that is the most decentralized protocol out there, took 12 years. It's like at the beginning it was only Satoshi, and then Halfini joined, and then you have maybe 2 guys mining, and then 3 guys mining, and now we have an industry, more and more fragmented industry. So, I mean, decentralization is clearly a process. And we need to protect that ethos, and the convergence I'm seeing is this. It's like on one side is this factor that Ian is mentioning. Crypto assets, Bitcoin mostly, and stable assets have penetrated into the institutional realm. That was unthinkable a few years ago. We were all expecting this to happen. Now it's a reality. And at the same time, the main problems that these technologies had to scale and from a user and to become user friendly or be able to compete in terms of user experience with the fintech or the traditional financial solutions have been found. During the last 2-3 years, all the things that maybe are a little bit technical, the things that Eden was mentioning about rollups, and are basically scaling solutions that can make these systems scale and be sustainable and be cost efficient for the user. So now you are in the face of solutions that can enable transactions at a fraction of a cent. That will be, from a user perspective, will settle instantly, and with some other things that are being deployed as we speak. Also, the users will be able to transact in any asset without knowing that a network is underneath. But they will be operating on a fully decentralized environment, but the experience will be the same that you will get from N26 or Revolut or any traditional neobank or wallet. So for me, 2021 is the year when crypto starts getting into mass adoption. It's the moment where crypto has overcome all the shortcomings in terms of scalability, usability, and penetration of the traditional financial system. So I think 2021 will be a very exciting year for our ecosystem, because we will see this mass adoption getting started. And it's a process, of course, because we are maybe reaching now to 1%, 2%, 3% of the population at most. So we have a long way to go for this to become mainstream. But the conditions for this to become mainstream are here. It's no longer something of the future. It's no longer something we need to figure out. All the elements to become mainstream are already here. and that's a big change.
So, Max, I want to flip it over to you. One of the things that was a pretty remarkable to see last year was the growth in the stablecoin ecosystem. You had less than 5 billion in stablecoins or USD stablecoins in circulation at the beginning of the year to over, I think, 23 billion by the end of the year. Where do stablecoins fit into this DeFi on Bitcoin ecosystem, and what's different about the way that you guys are approaching this your particular project?
Well, I see stable coins that are going to be
I think we just lost Max.
Yeah, I think we lost him.
Technical difficulties.
So,
I'm not hearing you, Max.
yeah.
I don't know if the
Yeah.
speaker for that. Let's flip it. See if we can get this sorted out. I wanted to go to the next question because I think it's actually potentially related, which is about users and audience. So obviously, one of the driving factors, perhaps the driving factor in this rally, this sort of bull market that we're seeing emerge now, is the introduction of these big institutional players. On the flip side, a lot of the implications of what you guys are talking about, the users that you've built for, the people who are kind of the early adopters, represent a totally different part of the economic spectrum, right? And so I guess I'm interested in kind of the broader expanse of users that you guys are approaching, because again, I think if you could levy one critique of DeFi, so far, it's been that it's been largely focused on sort of a set of early adopters in crypto, but that doesn't really seem to be where you guys are. So let's talk, I guess, about the user base and who you're actually seeing use these new tools and why it's so different. Diego, I guess we'll start with you and then we'll move over.
Well, there's one thing that I think Ethan mentioned already, is that what I've seen, and I realized about this cycle very late in the game, but what I realized is that people get into crypto for the bull run. They get basically when the news start, like talking about Bitcoin being the money making machine, or Bitcoin being price soaring. Is like usually people get for the price. It's like that's how people get into it. But actually, people use it when crises arise, or mostly that's the case in Latin America and in emerging markets. So every time we have these price runs, these bull runs, what happens is a lot of people, non-crypto people, gets into the space, and that's what all the ones we have been in this space for a while. Every time we had the bull run in 2013, we had two, one at the beginning of the year, another one at the end, then the bull run in 2017, and this one is no different. What we see is like every friend, family member, like starting, and every time it gets bigger. It's like we get questions. So it's not a particular type of user. That's what is changing. At the beginning, it was only the techies, the financial experts, the people who, or the idealists, those who were seeing something. But now what we are seeing is like our families, our friends are interested into this, are willing to either first Bitcoins, are willing. So this is the most widespread wave of interest I've seen so far, and then that's becoming bigger and bigger. But the interesting thing is like maybe people will get in the hype. Usually that's not a good thing, because they get in the middle of the bull run, or sometimes at the top. Then we know that this will adjust, and once people adjust, people lose interest or feel bad about it if they didn't join with enough knowledge about what they were joining in. But what it creates is like the user base expands anyhow. So what we are doing, I mean, this is a cycle of expansion of the user base. But the real usage in Latin America, in situations, it's happening when the crisis arises. That's when people start really buying Bitcoin and hedging against the risk they are exposed to in their local countries and nations. So we are seeing these, like, I would say, yeah, complementary cycles happening, and that's what I've been seeing here. And the people who is contacting me is, like, again, from my family, friends, to CEOs of companies. It's like very, very broad. It's not a specific user. In the case of what Eden and Max are offering, that is, maybe it's more related to the existing user base of crypto users more than the new users, because the new users, as I said, enter because they want the investment part. They want to have a fraction of a Bitcoin or get into the crypto assets somehow. So it's a different interest. Yeah, so I think the wave of users for DeFi and everything is the users that already are in crypto and are willing to do things with the crypto they have.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think you can think of sovereignty, and I think what Diego pointed out as being key is knowledge. Sovereignty is a ladder that people sort of climb as they become more knowledgeable. So you start off probably ignorant of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and probably as a result very dismissive, and you're trapped in the fiat world. Then you become curious. You start educating yourself, and you're already a little bit more free. You've freed your mind, but maybe not your wallet. The next step that most people take is they'll go and they'll buy some Bitcoin. So maybe they do it on a Coinbase, and they keep the funds there, and they go through the KYC process, and they haven't really changed their behavior with money or their relationship with money, but they now own an asset which has the promise of sovereignty for them. And the stage after that, they withdraw their funds, hold them in their own wallet. And I think parallel to this process, you have the same process basically happening for the technologies. We started off with Bitcoin as sort of like this toy. As we've become more knowledgeable about it, it's become more sophisticated in the things that you can do with it. We've seen the emergence of smart contracts, Ethereum, and DeFi, which further expands the capabilities of these technologies. And so, for example, with us, for Sovereign, our primary users are not institutions, and they're also not the first, people who are just coming into the space for the first time. They are people who have probably been here for a while. Usually they came in one of the previous bubbles, which is basically when everyone always comes in. And as a result, they've had some time to marinate in freedom. They've had some time to learn about how they can achieve self-sovereignty, and they are ready to take the step of using their funds to their full potential on decentralized services. The interesting thing is that, people, especially in the West, tend to think of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is primarily a Western phenomenon. And indeed, our biggest country in terms of users, in terms of the IPs that we see, is the United States, which makes sense because it's becoming a less and less free country from a financial economic perspective. But it overall it and Europe represent a small fraction of the total number of users that use the Sovereign protocol. We people from Africa, people from Argentina, people from China, people from India, especially from India, actually, where there's very few good regulated alternatives. And so growing up, as I did, and really everyone on this panel did, in environments which are less free is a really good education in how you need to achieve your own sovereignty. And as a result, I think that's driving a lot of this interest in DeFi and in having alternatives to centralized services. And maybe just one thing I'll just add to that is, I think this is particularly important for Bitcoin in particular, because Bitcoin isn't held primarily or isn't used primarily as many of sort of like the altcoins as a speculative day trader type asset. It, more than any other asset, is held as a true reserve asset for people who need some kind of financial sovereignty and some kind of outlet. And so for that reason, having permissionless, incorruptible, borderless solutions for trading, for managing your funds, for borrowing and lending, is probably more important for Bitcoin than maybe any other asset class.
I guess people came to Bitcoin for the price and then stay for the technology and the ideology. One very interesting thing that we are seeing right now is people came in to the space because of the prices going up, and people want to speculate with the price of Bitcoin. But after they buy Bitcoin, they start researching the space, and they will find this solution like money on chain, like sovereign, etc. And they will discover that they can do almost everything they can do in the actual financial world, but with transparent solutions in an environment where no one can change the rules. People in Argentina is very afraid of banks because for example, my father lost like 4 times the savings of his life because one day you wake up in Argentina and suddenly the government said, well, all the deposits in the banks will remain in the banks and we are going to give it you back with 50 or 75% devaluation. And that is common in Argentina. People is afraid of the financial system. And Bitcoin and DeFi and RSK, money on chain, sovereign gives a real alternative, a real transparent and completely uncorruptible alternative.
And I think that's a perfect segue to something that we kind of mentioned earlier, but I wanted to come back to. It's a quote that I wrote down when we were talking about this in advance. Someone said the next step is building a decentralized financial system on Bitcoin. The end boss is building a decentralized economic system. And it sounds like that's kind of what you're talking about.
Absolutely. I think that's the point. It's like, and you know, to be, I mean, why? Why is, I think it's like, it's more and more evident that, you know, traditional systems are failing the people. Like when I mean traditional systems, I'm talking about traditional monetary systems. The banking system is in a process where, due to the risking processes, they are unbanking people that it's banked already. I mean, you go to the Caribbean, you will see what's happening. It's like, you know, it's like even if you are middle class, you might be unbanked because, you know, the risking process requires so, because the compliance levels and everything is like going to the roof, and the cost of operating in centralized models, and I mean the trust model of centralized models requires insurance, security models that are very expensive. So this is not just taking the world by a storm because we say so or because we want it to be so. It's because it's a more efficient financial system, because it's a system that is inclusive by design. Now we have half of the population excluded from the financial system. Basically, there's many reasons, but some of the main reasons are because inefficiency. The maintenance cost of an account, the transactional costs that are percentual. Most of the traditional financial services charge a percentage of the transaction, so they cut a fraction of your business. And these models that we are building, all these protocols and solutions we are building, are nominal in cost. It's like if you want to use the maximum security layer, like Bitcoin, okay, you will pay 50 cents, $1, $2. We don't know exactly what will be the final price once everything is stabilized and the whole society is relying on those foundations. But you know, it doesn't matter how much money you're moving, you will pay a fixed price for maximum security. If you want to go to the second layer and have more flexible, you can have more complex financial services, you can do more transactions in faster terms, still with decentralized security, and okay, then you will pay a few cents like you do in RSK. and then you are paying more, sacrificing some security. If you go to the upper layers, you will have, you can go to tens of thousands of transactions per second. So you finally can serve the whole humanity, and then everyone will pay a fraction of a cent. So what we are building is a stack of protocols and services on top of those protocols that actually can replace the traditional infrastructure in a more efficient way, in an inclusive way, and with another element that is key, that is native interoperability. Each protocol in these networks instantly can speak to the other protocol. So the composability of these protocols, it's impossible to achieve in the traditional model where legal contracts are the way of establishing interoperability between financial services and protocols. So that's basically why this is going to become the financial system of the future. And personally, I think Bitcoin is going to be the foundations of that, because you need a store of value that is reliable, censorship resistant, and Bitcoin is clearly that network. So that's why we are building everything. And that's why I think DeFi, it's so important. DeFi on Bitcoin or for Bitcoin is so important, because we need Bitcoin to be more than a store of value if we want to this reality or this vision to become a reality.
I guess, so you guys have talked a lot about both the big picture, the big opportunity, the big vision, as well as what's been happening over the course of the last few years, the trends that got us here, the technology updates that got us here. What does 2021 look like? What are the next steps? And how does this context of what appears to be a surging bull market, notwithstanding the last day or so, how does that change, that what comes next question?
Well, I think I spoke earlier about these big trends, and I think these trends aren't slowing down. They're going to accelerate, and they're going to dominate 2021. So I think 2021 is going to be a continual inflationary driven asset boom across all asset classes, but which will particularly impact Bitcoin. And Bitcoin being the center of gravity for the entire crypto space is going to mean that we're going to see continued price appreciation across the entire crypto space. This is at the same time, as a result, going to put increasing pressure across all of our services in two ways. On the one hand, we're going to see Coinbase go down every couple of weeks on an ongoing basis. We're going to see Kraken, stop withdrawals, or some other exchange are going to announce that they're stopping withdrawals because they can't handle the volume. And then the second type of pressure that is going to be on these centralized services is going to be regulatory pressure, which is going to become more and more and more apparent. And the more systemically important the crypto asset space becomes, the more clear it's going to be to governments around the world that they need to have a stake in this at best, and potentially fight it at worst. I think maybe if I were to say there's like one big story here, is that we in the Bitcoin space, in the crypto space, we're at the end of the beginning. We've had a sort of like 10, 11-year honeymoon phase where you could be blindfolded and drunk and throwing darts at a wall. You bought pretty much anything. You even bought XRP and you looked like a genius, right? And there, at the same time, the regulators pretty much ignored us. So, Charlie Shrem got arrested and some dark markets got brought down, but there hasn't been any concerted effort, certainly no coordinated concerted effort by countries to really tackle this. And so in this honeymoon phase, we did what bored people without any real stressors always do. We turned on ourselves, right? And Bitcoiners hated Ethereum people, and Ethereum people hated XRP people, and XRP people hated Monero, and Monero hated Zcash. And we would spend our time whiling away this honeymoon on Twitter, telling each other, have fun staying poor. But that honeymoon phase is over. We are now entering a phase where we are a real threat, and there are real institutional interests involved in what we're doing. And this is going to be amazing and exciting from a price appreciation perspective, and is going to be extremely threatening from a regulatory perspective. And it's going to be questionable whether or not, if you put funds onto a centralized service, you'll ever be able to take them off onto a sovereign wallet ever again. This is not going to play out in its entirety over 2021. It's going to be a 10-year battle that we're going to be fighting. But I think what's exciting and scary about it is, on the one hand, this has now started. I think the real battle has started. We've gone from the first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, to the fight you phase. We're now in the fight you phase. And it's exciting because it's going to mean that we're very quickly going to educate ourselves and the entire world on the importance of financial sovereignty. And I also think that it's going to mean a very quick and sudden end to a lot of crypto tribalism. I think we're going to realize that the narcissism of small differences that we have amongst the different coins is vanishingly unimportant in comparison to the difference we have with this, I'll call it the no coiner status quo.
I completely agree. I think we are about to have our Napster moment. You know, Napster changed how the entertainment industry worked, and it changed it for good. There was no going back. But before that, there was a lot of fight. In Argentina, for example, people they were like, you know, aiming at the users, like, you know, for sharing files and you know, taking you to court for sharing files. And of course, at certain point, it became ridiculous to do that. They had a realization you could not fight a decentralized, you know, system. You cannot stop it. Bitcoin was born out of that wisdom. Bitcoin was born with that wisdom at its core, and everything we are building inherits that wisdom as well. So at the same time that, you know, crypto is starting, I like that phrase that Eden said, we are at the end of the beginning. At the same time that crypto is starting the mainstream phase, the things will get ugly. We will have more and more, and as it happened in the past, both sides will have to give something. You know, it's like regulators will have to give something. The regulations are based on customs. They are following human behavior. They are not something that God sent us. So in that sense, what we will see is that that process of, you know, the clash of the massive innovation this ecosystem is bringing to society, the value that is bringing for people in our societies, versus the status quo trying to fight back and to keep things as they were. But you know, this is a tsunami coming for them, so they will have to give up at a certain point. But the fight is coming. That's completely right.
I agree with Diego and Yago. I think that in 2021, we are going to see a lot of people finally accepting Bitcoin as a store of value, and that is great. I see DeFi on Bitcoin growing probably 100 times. And I see the regulators coming to the space, and I really hope that regulators understand what we are doing and how this technology can change the life of billions of people for good.
I think it's a really good note to wrap up on. I mean, I think if I had to just kind of sum up everything that we've said, it's this year is going to be a bigification of everything: bigger markets, bigger swings, bigger fights with regulators, bigger challenges, much bigger opportunities, and hopefully a much bigger context. And I think it's really exciting to see all of the work that's going into enabling that next set of use cases, users, opportunities, the move from just a decentralized asset to a decentralized financial system to ultimately a decentralized economic system for everyone is something that's super exciting. So thank you guys all so much for spending time with us today. We'll make sure that this goes up online and people can catch it after. But for now, enjoy these crazy markets, these turbulent times, and think about what comes next. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you very
Enjoy
much.
as well.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Great talk.